and I would like here to close the proceedings and if you like. Yes, very good. Do we have questions?
You don't mind to stay with
Yes.
13, 10 or 15 more minutes?
Sorry, I'm pointing to the guy behind you. Your ladies first.
Thank you very much. I make it very short question. Thank you very much for coming here. And, quite a long time ago that I impressed very much that you pointed me out that the existence of comma in between India, China, and Japan. And so now, how do you think about your Kohai, that now new generation, many foreign writers write all Japanese novel in Japanese. And so I'm also teaching Japanese language, so I enjoy reading their books together with foreign students.
I shouldn't give the impression that I don't read or don't like modern literature. The fact is that I have translated at least one or two works of some important modern writers, and I have a high opinion of them. But my present state of mind is one of wanting to do another book. That I want. There's so much I want to write about, and in order to write these other books, I must devote most of my time to reading works by these authors. I don't have the leisure to read as I used to works by contemporary writers who might very well interest me if I spent the time on them. But I think that they certainly must be worthy Japanese writers. There's no reason why they shouldn't be.
Oh.
Professor Kim, when you start just reading your washi paper, your kyoku all the time, do you come up with 2 or 3 beautiful, rather modern phrases which perhaps you could recommend our youngsters to use in a daily conversation? Because I was radio announcer, so now I watch or listen to Japanese, even NHK. It's appalling. Half, nearly like a destroyed. So if you could choose a few words by Professor Kim, then this might spread all over Japan.
I'm not sure this is an answer to your question, but there are different writers who are easy to translate, easy to approach. In my own case, the writer I had the least trouble with was Dazai Osamu. I've translated his book, which I call The Setting Sun. My first year of teaching at Columbia University, my first year of having a social life, going out to dinners and going to the theater and so on, I was terribly busy. And I don't know how I managed it, but I translated this very, very quickly. When I told people about that, people they said, well, it must be because you're like Dazai Osamu. But I can't think of anyone who's less like me than Dazai Osamu. At least as he appears in his works, I've never taken drugs. I'm not interested in large quantities of liquor. there are many differences separating us, and I don't have his extraordinary and moving self-pity, which is one of his characteristics. But nevertheless, he was easy for me for some reason. His language and my language, my normal language, must be close because of our personalities. I think that it's very hard to find books or texts which will work for everybody. For example, I'm very fond of Tsure's Rusa. It's one of my favorite, but it's not a good work to use for teaching because there are very few incidents that are exciting. On the other hand, Hojoki is a marvelous book for teaching Japanese. It's absolutely the best. It has lots of interesting things that happen, well told, simple language. I've taught it many times. I can even now tell you whether a certain word appears in this work or not. But I don't think it's possible to help everybody with the same book. It depends on the person in question.
Lucy Birmingham Freelance, thank you so much for coming. It's a great honor for us to have you here. I have a very simple but also a very complicated question. Why have you decided to become a Japanese citizen?
I've been hoping somebody would ask that. Well, it's a long story, but what surprises me now is why it took so long for me to reach that decision. It should have happened a long time ago. My whole life is concerned with Japan. I think it's literally true that not a day has passed, certainly since I was 20, that I didn't think about Japan in some capacity during the course of the day. I discovered that the way of life in Japan appealed to me more than the way of life in New York. That's not hard to be. The fact that I've had regular publicity in recent ones has meant that all kinds of people, for no reason at all, just because they're nice, have said something as they pass me in the street. There's nothing I can do short of committing murder that would give me that kind of reputation in New York. But that's of course a joke. But anyway, I feel at home here. I have probably more Japanese friends than I have in any other country, although I like people from other countries. And it suddenly seemed to me that this was a logical thing to do. There's also a silly thing, but it had an effect on me. I noticed that people, when they would ask me when I returned to Japan, they would never say, "Itsu kairimashita ka?" But it's always, "Itsu modorimashita ka?" It means exactly the same thing. The verb modoru means to come back, and so is kairu. But kairu is reserved for Japanese. Foreigners are not allowed to kairu. They must modoru. And I didn't like that. This just separated me from the Japanese. I wanted to kairu like all the other Japanese. That's a silly reason, perhaps, but it's symptomatic of something. I got tired of being different, and wanting to be, insofar as my face would permit, like a Japanese. And this seemed the logical thing for me to do. And I thought about it over the months and have not changed my mind.
last question. Last.
Yes, it's not over there. So. One minute.
Good evening. One simple question. One of my friends asked me before I came here, do you have Japanese name?